Okay, class, so we will continue our discussion, and we are now in lesson 15, and we will talk about the impact of business on the community. And we will focus on the part of externalities. So before we will proceed to our discussion, we will have this, or I will present to you the expectation on this lesson. So after going through this lesson, you are expected to define positive and negative externality, evaluate the impact of the externalities on the society, and lastly, formulate a policy to temper the negative externality. So before we proceed again to our lesson, we will have a pre-test first. Question number 1. It occurs when producing or consuming a good causes an impact on third parties not directly related to the transaction. A. Consumption failure. B. Production failure. C. Business externality. Or D. Internality. Externality, I mean. So again, this occurs when producing or consuming a good causes an impact on third parties not directly related to the transaction. The answer for question number 1 is letter D, externality. Question number 2. It is a benefit that is enjoyed by a third party as a result of an economic transaction. A. Externality. B. Positive externality. C. Negative externality. Or D. Business externality. Again, it is a benefit that is enjoyed by a third party as a result of an economic transaction. So the answer for question number 2 is letter B, positive externality. Now let's proceed to question number 3. Which of the following is an example of a negative externality? A. Buying an electric car, which produces pollution. B. Buying a bicycle, which reduces pollution and congestion. C. Building a cafe that employs previously homeless people. Or D. Farmers use fertilizers and pesticide which harms insects. So which among of these four choices an example of a negative externality? So the three of the choices were a positive externality except one. So the answer for question number 3 is letter D. Farmers use fertilizers and pesticide which harm insects. Question number 4. Which of the following statements is not true about positive externality? A. When consuming a product leads to benefits for other people. B. The social benefit of consuming education is greater than your personal benefit. Or C. If the person smokes in a crowded room, other people have to breathe the smoke. Or letter D. None of the above. So which of the following statements is not true about positive externality? The answer for question number 4 is letter C. The person smokes in the crowded room. Other people have to breathe the smoke. And last question, or last number, number 5. A tax placed on a good to take into account this external cost and move output closer to the level of social efficiency. A. Bigovian tax. B. Progressive tax. C. Excise tax. Or D. Ad valorem tax. A tax placed on a good to take into account that this external cost and move output closer to the level of social efficiency. So the answer for question number 5 is other than letter A, Bigovian tax. So again, congratulations those who got the perfect score for this lesson number 15. Again, we will focus on the externalities. So before I will proceed to my explanation, I will play a video clip with regards to the overview of externalities or what is externalities. It is presented by Investopedia. So let's watch this video.
An externality in economics is a cost or benefit incurred or received by a third party who has no control over the factors that created the cost or benefit. Consider pollution. A factory emitting toxins dirties the surrounding environment. This creates health problems for the local residents. Up until the latter part of the 1900s, the cost for industrial pollution cleanup and the related health issues were paid for by the local governments and the sickened people who paid for their own medical care, not the factories that produce the pollution. This is an example of an externality. Greater use of government regulations and tort litigation has shifted the cost of negative externalities to the entities creating them. This tends to cause the prices for the products in the affected industries to rise as manufacturers pass on the expense. In fact, some economists argue that market failure occurs if the price of a product does not reflect all the costs associated with producing it, both direct and social costs. Externalities also exist in a positive way. For example, grassroots and government emphasis on education generates a smarter workforce. Companies who hire these graduates reap the benefit of intelligent, creative workers who innovate and require less training. The company earns more money because of the innovation and saves money because of reduced training costs.
So those are the simplest explanation with regards to externality. So this is normal in the business world. There will be an externality happen in every business operation. So again, as to definition, externality is this a cost or a benefit caused by an economic actor that is not suffered or enjoyed by that same actor. Okay, so there is a positive and also the negative effect or cause of this externality. Okay, so again, externality is a cost or benefit caused by a producer that is not financially incurred or received by the producer. So an externality can be either a positive, okay, positive or a negative, and can stem from either the production or the consumption. So there are two stem here, the production and the consumption. So it is on the side of a good or a service. Okay, so the cost and benefits can be both private to an individual or an organization or a social, meaning it can affect society as a whole, just like in the video that we watched a while ago. So the externalities by nature are generally environmental, such as natural resources or public health. So, for example, a negative externality is a business that causes pollution that diminishes the property values or health of the people in the surrounding area. It's like again in the video that you have watched, it is an example of a manufacturer that the waste of their, the raw materials, it can damage the environment. Okay, that's one of the example of a negative externality. So positive externality also includes actions that reduce transmissions of disease or avoids the use of lawn treatments that run off to rivers and thus contribute to excess plant growth in lakes. So again, externalities are different from donations of parkland or open source software. So now let's move on to the positive externality. Again, there's a negative, there's a cost, and there's a benefit, positive side of externality. So as we read this definition, positive externality, these are two main types of externalities. We have positive and we also have negative. Okay, we'll use a pointer here. Positive and negative. So a negative externality refers to unintended negative consequences. So in every business operation, there will be a positive and negative. So for the part of negative externality, it refers to the unintended negative consequences. Okay, so there's a consequences or the result of this business operation. On the other hand, the positive externality refers to unintended positive consequences. Okay. And there are also other types of externalities. We have precautionary externalities, those which affect a third party's profit but not their ability to consume or produce. We also have inframarginal externalities. This is externalities that don't benefit or harm the marginal consumer, the majority. And we also have technological externalities. It is technological effects that directly influence a firm's production. So these are the examples of the externalities. First, gentrification and house prices, vaccines and herd immunity. We also have beekeeping and plant pollination, bakeries and great smell. Also have education and quality of life. And lastly, research and accidental discoveries. So again, we will focus on the positive externalities. So positive externality is a benefit that is enjoyed by a third party as a result of economic transaction. So while individuals who benefit from positive externalities without paying are considered to be free riders. This is we already discussed this in the previous lesson. There are someone who were benefited on the certain transactions. They were called free riders. It may be in the interest of society or encourage free riders to consume goods that generate substantial external benefits. So I'll show you a graph here, an example of positive externality. And we will focus um, in the area of production. Okay, positive externality in production. Okay, so this line represents to the free market. Okay, this line, and this Q2, this line represents the socially efficient. Okay, socially efficient. The P1 is the production. Okay, P2 is also the production. And this one is the dead weight welfare loss. Okay, so we'll explain on this what it means by this graph. So the positive externality in production, for example, this one, a farmer grows an apple tree. Okay, okay, for example, this is an apple tree, fruit of an apple. Okay, an external benefit is that he provides nectar for a nearby beekeeper who gains increased honey as a result of the farmer's orchard. Okay, again, a farmer plants an apple trees. And then on the other land, for example, there are having a business that they will produce a honey, okay, and they will sell the honey. So it will benefits the beekeeper who gains increased honey as a result of the farmer's orchard. So in this case, the social cost is less than the private cost. So the beekeeper saves the cost of having to provide a source of nectar because we have the neighbor who planted an apple tree. So in this example, it works both ways. So the beekeeper provides an external benefit to the apple grower because his bees help to fertilize the apple tree. Another example, let's say a private school provides an external benefit because the workforce will be more educated in the future and it saves the cost of the government education in publicly funded school. So this is an example of positive externality in production. So we will go back to the example of a farmers who plant trees. So they will be benefited because they have a bees on the neighborhood. It will helps to, you know, to provides or to fertilize the apple tree. On the other hand, the beekeeper also were benefited because they have this, the farmers have the nectar of his apple trees. So both parties were benefited of this, we call it externality, and they focus on the production side. Now let's proceed to the negative externalities. Though we have the positive externalities, But we also have these negative externalities. So the negative externality is a cost that is suffered by a third party as a consequences of economic transaction. So in transaction, the producer and the consumer are the first and the second parties. And the third parties include any individual, organization, property owner, or a resource that is indirectly affected. Again, the first party and the second party is the consumer and the producer. The third parties includes again the individual, organization, property owners, and etc. Okay. So for example, this one, the private costs to the consumer, and we have the social costs. So it affects the third parties. So now we will discuss about the negative externality in the area of production. So for example, also, um, a certain business is making a furniture by cutting down trees in the Cordillera, for example, leads to in negative externalities to other people. Firstly, it harms the indigenous people of the Cordillera region or Cordillera, that particular place, I mean. And it also leads to higher global warming as there are fewer trees to absorb carbon dioxide. So the social cost of making furniture is greater than the private cost to a firm. Okay, another example of a non-organic vegetable growing. Farmers use fertilizers and pesticides, which harms insects and also can get into the food chain, causing health problems in the future. So those are some examples of the negative externalities in the area of production. And usually, the negative externalities is on the area of the environment. Now, there are also negative externalities in the area of consumption. So, when assuming a product causes cost to a third party, for example, if the person smokes in a crowded room, so other people have to breathe the smoke, and this is unpleasant for them and can leave them exposed to health problems associated with the smoking. Okay, and other examples are drinking alcohol and then driving can lead to accidents which hurt innocent bystanders, and playing loud music annoys your neighbor. So that is an example of negative externality in consumption. Okay, so that is a basic about the negative externality in consumption. So now let's talk about the call it a Peugeot on externalities. So in 1920, Arthur C. I don't know how to really pronounce this one. There's a lot of pronunciation on this. Peugeot or Peugeot wrote a a book about the economics of welfare, which is an early exposition of this concept. So Mr. Arthur noted that the private business pursued their marginal private interests. However, industrialists, industrialists, okay, were not concerned with any external costs to others in society. So there's a problem in the year 1920 on this part because the business owner doesn't have a concern with the society, the effect of their business. So in other words, they had no incentives to internalize the full social costs of their actions. And this led to the deadweight welfare laws, as I have discussed a while ago. So Mr. Arthur used an example of a contractor building a factory in the middle of a neighborhood. So the factory leads to external cost faced by those living in the locality. So these external costs include pollutions, congestions, damage to health, and loss of life. So Mr. Arthur also used the example of an alcohol. And alcohol has a private benefit to firms, but also the sale of alcohol leads to additional cost to society in terms of increased demand for healthcare and law and order. So we come up or they come up with this Vigovian tax. Okay, there's a lot of tax, and this is one also of the Codificavian tax. It is a place on a good to take into account this external cost and move output closer to the level of social efficiency. Okay, thank you for listening, and let's proceed to valuing part, and we will reflect on this. Markets are lethal only because of ignoring externalities, the impacts of their transactions on the environment, by Noam Chomsky or Chomsky.